Everyone, my name is Rob Hope. I'm director of Rework the Bay. Thank you all for joining us this morning. I think this is going to be a great session. As we begin today's session, I'd like to introduce our partner, Trilce, who will orient us to how we'll be practicing language justice and interpretation in today's session. Trilce, welcome.
Thank you, Rob, and thank you for putting the slides up. Great. My name is Trilce Santana, and for this event, we're going to be in practice of language justice. And I'm going to actually do this section bilingually, so you'll hear it in both languages. Para este evento estaremos practicando la justicia del lenguaje. Language justice includes the right everyone has to communicate in the language or languages in which they feel most comfortable, to understand and to be understood, and a commitment to creating bilingual or multilingual spaces where no language will dominate over other languages. It also includes a respect for the language rights of all people. La justicia del lenguaje incluye el derecho que tienen todas las personas de comunicar en el idioma o idiomas en los que se sientan más cómodos, a comprender y ser comprendidos, así como el compromiso de crear espacios bilingües o multilingües donde ningún idioma dominará a otros idiomas. También incluye el respeto por los derechos lingüísticos de todas las personas. We will be holding this meeting in English and Spanish, and Andreina, the other interpreter, and I will be interpreting everything that is said throughout this call. Llevaremos a cabo esta reunión en inglés y español, y Andreina, la otra intérprete, y yo estaremos interpretando todo lo que se diga a lo largo de esta llamada. As part of our language justice practice, we want to acknowledge a couple of things. While we will be holding this meeting in English and Spanish, this may not reflect all of the languages that folks attending speak. We are speaking the language of colonizers rather than the original languages spoken in the places we are calling from. Many of us do not speak the languages that our ancestors spoke because of colonization and imperialism. We welcome all of the diverse ways that we speak language based on where we are from, the work we do, and our cultures. Como parte de nuestra práctica de justicia del lenguaje, queremos reconocer algunas cosas. Aunque esta reunión se llevará a cabo en inglés y español, es posible que esto no refleje todos los idiomas que hablan las personas que asistan. Hablamos los idiomas de los colonizadores en lugar de los idiomas originales de los lugares desde los que estamos llamando. Muchos de nosotros no hablamos los idiomas que hablaban nuestros antepasados debido a la colonización y el imperialismo. Damos la bienvenida a todas las diversas formas en que hablamos el idioma según nuestro lugar de origen, el trabajo que hacemos y nuestras culturas. We will be using the Zoom interpretation feature for this call. If you're accessing the call on a computer, and if you could switch now to the next slide, please, thank you. If you're accessing the call on a computer, please click on the globe at the bottom right of the screen and select the language in which you want to listen. If you're joining on a cell phone, if you could go to the next one now, the next slide. If you're joining on a cell phone, please click on the three dots under which it may say more, and then select interpretation, and then the language you want to listen. We will be monitoring the chat, so if you have any problems hearing the interpretation, please let us know by sending a message in the chat. And for folks who understand English only, there will be presentations in Spanish, so it's critical, and also in the Q&A, it is critical that you go into an English room to be able to understand the whole presentation today. Usaremos la función de interpretación de Zoom para esta llamada. Si accede a la llamada en la computadora portátil, haga clic en el globo terráqueo en la parte inferior derecha de la pantalla y seleccione el idioma en el que desea escuchar. Si se está uniendo por un teléfono celular, haga clic en los tres puntos debajo de los cuales puede decir más y luego seleccione interpretación y luego el idioma en el que desea escuchar. Estaremos monitoreando el chat, así que si tiene algún problema para escuchar la interpretación, háganoslo saber enviando un mensaje en el chat. So let's just make sure that the interpretation is working right now. I'm going to switch to Spanish to test out. ¿Me pueden oír todas las personas que están escuchando en inglés? Bueno, si alguien tiene algún problema escuchando, por favor, envíe un mensaje en la función del chat. Bueno, muchas gracias. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Rob. Thank you.
Thank you, Trilce, for that super helpful orientation, and to you and Adriana, both, Adriana, my apologies, our other interpreter today. A few more housekeeping items to mention as we get started. We are recording, as you can see. We'll be turning off the recording for the Q&A session following the speakers. We do encourage you to use the chat function early and often. In addition to using the chat for interpretation questions, please ask questions and share your reflections throughout today's session. We will be monitoring those chats, and we'll be integrating your questions into the Q&A session with all of the panelists at the end of the event today. You'll also notice that we'll be sharing some prompts in the chat in both English and Spanish. We unfortunately are unable to offer translation for audience comments in the chat, though questions, again, will be lifted up in the Q&A and will be translated at that time. And I also want to just thank our co-sponsors of today's session, the James Irvine Foundation, Funders for a Just Economy at Neighborhood Funders Group, and the San Francisco Foundation. So for those of you who are new to Rework the Bay, we're a funder to field collaborative working to realize a just and inclusive San Francisco Bay Area. As you all know, our region, state, and country are experiencing unprecedented wildfires, floods, droughts, and other climate-driven disasters, and the impacts of those events disproportionately affect communities of color. We believe that a sustainable, just economic future isn't possible without a transition to clean energy that offers living wage jobs. Rework the Bay is fortunate to count as partners incredible frontline leaders who are pushing to ensure the recovery policy and investments address the climate crisis, create high road jobs, and fuel a racially equitable economic recovery. Today, we'll hear from several of those partners and worker leaders on the ground experiencing the impacts of those changes. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to one of our partners, Michael Leon Guerrero. Michael is the Executive Director of the Labor Network for Sustainability. For 17 years, he's organized successful local and statewide environmental and economic justice campaigns in New Mexico. He's helped to build and lead regional and national networks and alliances, including the Grassroots Global Justice and Climate Justice Alliances. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Rob, and thank you to Rework the Bay and the other sponsoring organizations for today's event. As Rob said, my name is Michael Leon Guerrero. I'm the Executive Director of the Labor Network for Sustainability. We're a national network of workers, unions, other labor organizations, and climate justice allies that are working to build a powerful labor climate movement for an ecologically sustainable and economically just future. I want to start by saying that there are two very significant policy agendas that are being determined at this moment. In Glasgow, the United Nations Climate Change Conference just concluded, where world leaders made new agreements to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And in Washington, D.C., the recent infrastructure bill and potentially the Build Back Better Act will make available trillions of dollars to rebuild U.S. infrastructure, some of that targeted towards addressing climate change. The outcome of these negotiations will have important implications for workers around the world. Climate scientists have made it clear that we're in a crisis, and we need immediate action to stem the onslaught of major climate disasters that are taking a toll on people and the environment, particularly communities that already bear the heaviest burden from environmental pollution. Building clean energy economies and climate resiliency will shape the future of work. Jobs are emerging in clean energy, transportation, resilience infrastructure, and other areas. And many California workers understand the need and urgency to confront the climate crisis and the importance of labor playing a central role in that transition. And you'll hear from some of those worker leaders today. Climate chaos is shaping our whole economy and having severe impacts on workers and their communities. In 2019, for instance, 53 workers died due to temperature extremes. And this past summer, farm worker Sebastian Perez died from record heat in Oregon. Public sector unions depend on healthy state and local budgets for good contracts, yet these budgets are being challenged as billions of dollars are being spent for emergency response to wildfires and other climate disasters. In fact, there have been 285 weather and climate disasters costing over $1 billion in the US alone since 1980. Workers are also understanding the intersections between climate, workers' rights, and environmental justice. A mapping project recently done by the LA County Federation of Labor showed that a majority of their members live in neighborhoods experiencing environmental and health threats. With a massive economy and powerful environmental, labor, and economic justice movements, California could be a bellwether for a transition to an economy that's just and equitable. But the task won't be easy. California is a top oil and gas producing state. The 112,000 fossil fuel jobs in the state are good, high road union jobs with average pay and benefits among the highest among blue collar workers. These jobs have provided a livelihood and opportunities for workers and their families. And in California, it's a relatively diverse workforce with 44% people of color and 21% women. Many sectors of the renewable energy industry do not provide these same long-term career opportunities. And employers touted as environmental champions, like Tesla, are notoriously anti-union. So workers and labor organizations must be involved to ensure that the new economy has good jobs and strong labor standards. Just transition also has to be core to this effort. Last year, LNS completed a just transition listening project. We conducted over 100 in-depth interviews in 26 states with workers and community leaders who lived through large-scale job loss in their communities. They described the devastation in the wake of plant closings and support systems that were wholly inadequate. Many lost family members or friends to suicide, alcoholism, or drug addiction. So the safety nets and financial investment in workers, their families, and communities is an absolute necessity. So our strategy is to build a labor climate movement that's rooted in environmental and economic justice. This means that affected workers and historically marginalized communities of color are leaders in the process of the transition. We need to organize at all levels, nationally, locally, and statewide. The network represented here today gives us the capacity to do that. LNS has an organizer in Los Angeles. Jobs with Justice San Francisco and North Bay Jobs with Justice are building strong, diverse coalitions in the northern part of the state. And 20 powerful union locals are engaged in organizing and policy work from San Diego and Imperial County through the Central Valley and Northern California. The network also provides a vehicle to coordinate statewide on policy goals that are guided by the California Climate Jobs Plan, which Kung will tell you more about in a minute. To build a broader movement, we need to win. Environmentalists also must understand that good labor policy, such as the Protecting the Right to Organize Act, is also good climate policy. So we've been coordinating with environmental and environmental justice allies at the state and national level to include high road labor standards in their agenda. Organizing at the intersection of labor and climate is timely, it's urgent, and absolutely necessary work that provides a critical pathway for building power for workers and communities into the future. And we look forward to partnering with you all on this effort. So with that, I am going to pass it on to Kung Feng. He's the Executive Director of Jobs with Justice San Francisco. In the last 20 years, he's organized with workers in a wide range of contexts, from immigrant restaurant workers to bike passengers, led innovative campaigns supporting fast food, retail, and app workers, and founded cross-movement building projects such as Labor for Black Lives and Bay Resistance. So Kung, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks. So I'm Kong. I'm the Executive Director, Jobs with Justice, and we're part of a national network of Jobs with Justice affiliates across the country, including our sister organization here in North Bay, Jobs with Justice. Over the last 2 years, Jobs with Justice San Francisco and the Labor Network for Sustainability worked together with University of Massachusetts economist Dr. Robert Pollin, and we produced the California Climate Jobs Plan. It's a detailed study of what a just transition could look like and what it'll take. Where will there be jobs lost? How many? At what costs? Where could there be jobs created and with what investments? I think it's really important because a lot of our talk about just transition has seemed very visionary, but not necessarily practical. And this report is groundbreaking because it makes it concrete. And the headline is, if we meet California's existing climate goals of 40% emissions reduction by 2030, we will create 1 million new jobs. About half of these would be renewable energy and energy efficiency, half in manufacturing, public infrastructure, and agriculture. And in fact, about 100,000 of these would be in good public sector jobs. It's a helpful roadmap, and it outlines the work we have ahead, creating a safety net for the fossil fuel workers and their communities as transition happens, securing investments to create these million new jobs, ensuring that they come with strong labor standards, creating strong equity standards like targeted and local hire to make sure that the jobs are accessible for Black, Brown, and poor communities who've been shut out. I want to mention something, which is that a crisis is not only about threats, right? But it's also about opportunities. So for climate crisis, it's very, very prominent. This is an existential threat. It's an economic threat. In the last 10 years, California experienced 16 extreme weather events, and it cost the state from $50 to $100 billion in damages, right? So we are facing this threat, both the personal costs and our societal costs, but it's also a once in a generation opportunity. If we engage workers in climate policy, if we can do that, that is actually being able to intervene in the biggest opportunity we have to address racial and wealth inequality by creating and ensuring access to good jobs at scale and real economic opportunity for the Black, Brown, and working class communities. The Federal Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that was just signed will bring $45 billion in infrastructure investments just to California for transportation, high-speed internet, clean water, weatherization. We also expect in California another historic state budget surplus of $14 to $25 billion. There are massive investments on the horizon, but the question is, do we have the power? Do we have the plan to leverage them to create real equity? What we say a lot is that transition is inevitable, but justice is not. If we don't do this right, we could add an immense number of jobs, but they would be minimum wage jobs with no prospects. If we don't do this right, fossil fuel workers and many of the ones we work with that you'll hear more about later are the ones who are going to be left devastated. But if we do this right, we create a million new good jobs that include Black and brown workers and advance economic and racial equity. And so to do this, our first step is to include and make sure that workers are at the table to shape climate policy. There's no way that any climate plan can truly reflect and address what workers need without having workers involved. And so post this report, we formed just this year, the California Labor for Climate Justice, right? And we organized to have 20 unions endorse the California Climate Jobs Plan, including fossil fuel worker unions. Without this kind of labor engagement, without this kind of worker engagement, honestly, it's organizations like the Sierra Club and Greenpeace that are making policies that actually impact workers, right? It sounds kind of absurd, but this is actually what is going to go on. And unless we intervene, right? That's the reality we face if we don't organize workers in this field and create our own vehicle. And to do that, we also have to expand our understanding of what a climate worker is and what climate jobs are. There are many kinds of frontline workers when it comes to climate change, right? It's not just refinery workers. It is, right? It's fossil fuel workers, but it's also, care workers. I'm going to share now with Kim Moore, who is the special assistant to the executive director at United Domestic Workers, which represents 60,000 home care workers. And so we've talked about climate workers, not just being fossil fuel workers, not just being infrastructure workers, but also care workers. So Kim, if you could share your perspective, please.
Hi, yes, and good morning. Thank you all for being here. My name is Kim Moore. I'm on staff at United Domestic Workers, AFSCME, Local 3930. At UDW, we are a statewide union. We are by and for domestic workers, and this includes home care workers and child care workers. Our home care members take care of this state's most vulnerable people, those living with disabilities, chronic illnesses, and those who are aging. Our child care members take care of workers' children, other workers' children. Both of our members provide the necessary infrastructure for Californians to be able to work while their loved ones are cared for with dignity and respect. But climate change and oil and gas drilling is making that incredibly difficult. I'll share more about why that is. Personally, I've been a grassroots organizer for 16 years in my community of San Diego, and I know firsthand what environmental racism looks like. As a Black woman, it is difficult for me to ignore the fact that lifespans are shortened, lives are lost, Black lives also ended because of the fossil fuel air pollution that forces us to stay inside or rely on an inhaler or nebulizer just to be able to breathe. This is an extremely real reality, especially for our UDW members who are living in what I call the oil and gas drilling capital of California, which is Kern County. We have members throughout Kern County where they are struggling to preserve clean air and water. In Santa Barbara County, one current issue for our members that they're concerned about is ExxonMobil's proposal to transport oil by tanker trucks along California highways so it can restart 3 drilling platforms off the Santa Barbara coast. The plan calls for 70 trucks, 70, traveling Highway 101 and Route 166, which is the road from Santa Barbara County to Kern County, to refineries across the area. Our members are incredibly scared of oil spills. And so I pose the question, how can our members continue to do the work that they love, the work that allows other people to do their work, if our members' health is compromised? Fossil fuel pollution causes maternal health complications, it causes birth defects, it causes childhood asthma. And we all know the risk of heart disease, cancer, stroke, all of this is higher for people in communities of color. So this isn't abstract for us. Birthing people are losing pregnancies, babies are suffering, and our elders are getting sick. And we know this impacts Black, brown, and poor communities the most. This environmental racism must end, and it can. And we can address this without making a false choice between breathable air and a livable wage. We're here because we know that every Californian deserves a shot at good paying jobs, jobs that can provide for the for the health and well-being of our families, but also clean air to breathe. And our members and the community deserve to live in communities that are free from pollution and toxicity. Our members and the community deserve good health, and they deserve to be able to live their full lives. And we know that Californians do not have to choose between safe climate and a steady paycheck. Again, for us at UDW, we see this as a both and situation. We believe that people who have jobs in oil and gas drilling can and should be able to maintain work through a just transition, and that our members, their clients, and family members and their communities deserve to breathe, to live, and their kids deserve to be able to play outside without their health being jeopardized. We know both of these things can happen, and we know that both of these things, which are worker rights issues, are going to happen if we fight together to make this a reality. Again, our members care for the most vulnerable in California, and they're being made more vulnerable through fossil fuel pollution. This is an environmental justice issue. It's a racial justice issue. It's a gender justice issue. It's a disability justice issue. And it's also a worker justice issue. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kim, for bringing it home, bringing it together. It is absolutely all of those issues. And, I think to kind of wrap up, we really need to emphasize how workers need to be at the table, right? We need to have workers drive the policy, drive narrative, drive the change, right? So this inevitable climate and economic transition isn't just going to happen to people. It's going to happen to, Kim's members who live in, Kern County, right? But instead, it's actually going to be created by workers, and for them. I also wanted to lift up one of our California Labor for Climate Justice leaders who couldn't be here today because he's actually at the UN International Climate Meeting. And Norman Rogers is a steel worker who's worked in an oil refinery for over 20 years. And he wrote an op-ed that went in the LA Times recently about what's actually needed for a just transition for workers and, families like his. And he says, failing to plan is planning to fail. So if we don't plan to influence the shift to the green economy, we will fail California's workers, right? So an essential component of what CLCJ is doing in the next year is developing worker leadership, right? Making sure that there's people at the table to get the solutions right, since they are the people who will make this new economy work. We're going to be doing more political education, really investing in expanding membership in our coalition, creating a training curriculum to do this political education for members and leaders. And so there's more members and leaders who will take on power plants in Hayward, right? And take on those trucks that are bringing in pollution and win. We're also meeting regularly with environmental justice groups to build trust and coordinate priorities. Our partners, including Jeff Johnson, who pushed Initiative 1631 in Washington State, New York Renews, have also demonstrated the need to bring together these three groups to build the power we need to win. We're also focused on changing the narrative to emphasize this 1 million good climate jobs, right? There is so much possibility. We've done this throughout the report release, getting LA Times coverage. We were going to continue to develop the message and narrative and strategy to win with these op-eds and social media. And finally, we're going to push for policy change. We're going to have proposals that we're developing right now, including disaster relief for fossil fuel workers, and create these kind of innovative solutions that can bring about the programs and investments that we outline in the report and really leverage the massive opportunities we see coming in the next few years. Just a few weeks ago, members of CLCJ had a meeting with the governor's office about just transition funding. We had people from environmental justice groups, from the big environmental groups and unions. And before we could even start the meeting, they were like, wait, hold up. Wait, who are you? How? Tell us, how did you get into be in the same room together? They were so surprised. They went into it for question after question, even before we got into the meeting, to just explain how this incredible group of people actually got together, right? And so this coalition is really turning heads. And for us, what this coalition is about is, number one, right, getting workers at the climate table. So climate policy is driven by workers, and that will actually ensure that it advances racial and economic justice. It's also a strategic importance because labor sometimes can be the biggest obstacle to climate policy. And so we have to overcome this jobs versus environment deadlock that Kim talked about. And honestly, if that's the terms of the debate, there's no winner. There's no jobs on a dead planet, right? That is lose-lose for everyone involved. So we got to overcome that sort of frame, and we have to overcome that false division, right? And so an organized climate labor coalition is key to that. And then lastly, I think we need a statewide vehicle. So we have experiments in the North Bay, in Kern County, in SF, and LA, but we also need to contest at the state level where these kind of climate job policies are made. And in a state like California, that can actually lead the nation and have, a worldwide impact, just like what Norman is doing right now in the UN meeting. And to take an even bigger step back, right, the project of CLCJ is beyond the state level, right? If we were going to talk about a once in a generation opportunity for racial and economic equity, what we're talking about has to be large scale and structural change. And to accomplish that change, we need to bring whole movements together, right? And so there's this alignment that we're having between environmental justice groups, between big greens, and between labor movements. And so when we walk into that governor's office, right, we're creating a stir, we're turning heads, we're bringing up all these questions, right? But we're also bringing in the critical pieces. We're bringing in the critical people like Kim, like Norm, and really all of these people. And, I invite you to be part of that group of people that walks in together, right? And walks out together, because that's going to be critical if we're all going to have a future together. Thank you again for hearing from folks like Kim, and I'll turn it over to Michael now.
Great, thank you, Kong. And I want to bring in our next set of speakers now. Let me start with Max Bell Alper. He's the Executive Director of North Bay Jobs with Justice. They've been organizing with low-wage immigrant workers in California for the last 20 years. Max tries to spend as much time as possible in the garden and hiking in the woods. Margarita Garcia is a campesina, or farm worker, originally from Yucuhiti in Oaxaca, Mexico. Margarita's native language is Mixteco. She's been a leader for 30 years in her community, in her homeland, and in the county of Sonoma. And on her days off, she loves doing physical activities in the outdoors. Davin Cardenas is the director of organizing with North Bay Jobs with Justice. He's been a community organizer in Sonoma County for over 18 years, organizing amongst immigrants, students, renters, and congregations. He likes to run in his free time and root for the Warriors and A's. But despite that, welcome, Devin. And so let me pass it on over to you, Max, to get it started. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Michael, and thank you all for having us. We want to share a little bit about what it's like to be on the front lines of these climate change fueled wildfires. So we live in Sonoma and Napa counties, and for us, everything really changed 4 years ago in October of 2017, when the Tubbs fire came into Santa Rosa. 22 people lost their lives, over 6,000 structures burned, and that really has set off years and years of constant wildfires in Sonoma and Napa counties. We've all been impacted. I've had to evacuate multiple times over the last few years. Last year, one of the biggest fires that was part of the most destructive wildfire season in California came within a few miles of where I live. And so all of us in this area have been feeling the impacts, but the reality is not all of us are impacted the same. And at North Bay Jobs with Justice, we've been working really closely with immigrant and indigenous farm workers who are literally on the front lines, working in extreme heat, in smoke, including inside evacuation zones where everyone else has been legally removed from the area, but workers are going in there. There are thousands of farm workers in Sonoma and Napa County who are mostly working in wine grape production and harvest. And so this is a situation where immigrant and indigenous workers are risking their health, risking their lives on the front lines for these kind of luxury crops. And so what we've done over the last year here, after being in this crisis year after year, we took a major step this year, which was we actually started doing surveys with workers to understand what were their actual experiences during the wildfires. And so we developed an equipo, a team of farm worker organizers, including Margarita, who you'll hear from in a moment, where workers themselves were trained as organizers to be able to go out into their communities and do surveys. We did surveys in Spanish, as well as 3 indigenous languages, Mixteco, Triqui, and Chatino. Out of these surveys, we developed a series of priorities, which we'll get into. But most importantly, we developed a leadership committee of farm workers, a concilio. These concilios started off with bringing together 30 farm workers, and then every 6 weeks there was a new meeting, and these meetings have just been growing and growing and growing up until recently. 2 weeks ago we had the last one of the year where 150 farm workers came together, and to not only share what is it like to work in fires and to be able to stand up for these priorities, but people are actually sharing what is it, what are the ways in which people appreciate and respect and honor the rains, and doing that in all of these different indigenous languages, and to really ground people's response to living through climate change in people's ancestral knowledge, and in their experience of how to be able to move through this as a community and come together. Through this leadership committee, we've built a network of nearly 900 farm workers in Sonoma and Napa counties who are now linked into a network of text messages to be able to get the latest information on our campaign, as well as to report issues that are happening to them at work. And this has resulted in multiple wage theft cases coming forward and tens of thousands of dollars of workers winning wages that were stolen. And just this past weekend, we actually culminated our work for this harvest and wildfire season with a demonstration at a winery, one of the oldest wineries in Sonoma County, where 250 people came to demonstrate and to celebrate workers. And this was just such a broad coalition of farm workers and their families, plus Teamsters and day laborers and teachers and climate activists, and really to show the kind of strength of what this movement could look like. I'll put a link in the chat. You can check out some of the photos from it. People marching with signs that are bilingual and say, respect indigenous languages, or talk about hazard pay for farm workers when they have to work in these conditions. And so for us, we're looking to move away from going from crisis to crisis to crisis, but to get to some structural change here. And so as we're building a network of workers to improve the current jobs, we're also starting the conversation about what are the kinds of jobs that people need in the future, and really being guided by the leadership and knowledge and work experience of the farm workers themselves, of immigrant and indigenous leaders. And so we can transition from these exploitative jobs that further stress our environment to actually good jobs for BIPOC workers that can actually make our whole community more resilient in the face of these worsening wildfires. And so I want to turn it over to Margarita to share a little bit about her experiences and these 5 for farm workers and fires, and about this connection with the environment. And so es un honor aquí a presentar a nuestra compañera Margarita, uno de los líderes en el movimiento, que va a compartir un poco sobre su lucha y nuestras prioridades y la conexión con la naturaleza y cómo seguimos en esta lucha. So, adelante, Margarita.
Gracias, compañero. Tani ninunda kada no sibuni Margarita García y nyani ya ahika anihi unu nedani nunyu ka Sonoma ya. Muy buenos días a todos. Gracias por la invitación. Mi nombre es Margarita García y hoy estoy aquí para compartir los 5 puntos de las demandas que estamos trabajando junto con el trabajo de justicia. El primer punto que salió en las encuestas que se nos hizo a todos nosotros los trabajadores del campo fue sobre la justicia lingüística. En los campos de aquí de Condado del Sonoma estamos trabajando diferentes y variantes lenguas de la comunidad indígena de Oaxaca, que es la comunidad mixteca, triqui, chatino y entre otros variantes. Y es una pena y es un triste saber que durante los incendios o durante los momentos difíciles que no podemos trabajar, no tenemos acceso a la información en nuestro idioma. Y básicamente muchos de nuestros trabajadores están trabajando en lugares de evacuación o lugares que no deberían estar trabajando. Y yo creo que como trabajadores merecemos ese respeto y esa dignidad de que nos dejen por lo menos tomar un tiempo o no estar en esos lugares. El otro de los puntos es el seguro del desastre. Durante este tiempo o todos estos tiempos que hemos trabajado en los incendios, lo hemos experimentado año tras año. Estamos pidiendo, o los compañeros, no es mucho lo que se está pidiendo, sino que se nos respete o que se nos protejan también nuestros trabajos, o que nos den esos días que necesitamos descansar o estar con nuestras familias, así como respetan y protegen a sus cosechas. Nosotros, nuestras familias también merecen ese respeto de poder estar con nuestros hijos y necesitamos tener ese pago cuando estamos fuera del trabajo. No estamos faltando al trabajo por ser rebeldes o por no querer trabajar, sino tenemos la necesidad de estar con nuestras familias. Y como uno de los ejemplos, puedo dar un ejemplo. En el 2017 se quemó mi casa y lamentablemente yo no estaba en mi casa porque estaba trabajando de noche. Precisamente estábamos trabajando de noche ese día y realmente si no hubiera estado un adulto en la casa no hubiera podido sacar a las niñas de la casa. Se quemó la casa totalmente. Lo único que pudieron salvarse en esos días fueron las niñas, pero sin ningún artículo personal o familiar. Básicamente los recuerdos de la familia se quedaron entre cenizas. El otro punto es sobre los observadores comunitarios. Este año experimentamos diferentes también retos en los campos. Y gracias a estos observadores comunitarios que están siempre a nuestro respaldo o a nuestro llamado cuando estamos viendo que no nos están escuchando o que no nos dejan salir de trabajar, que quieren que seguir trabajando y seguir pescando, seguir en lo que sea, lo que estamos haciendo durante esos momentos difíciles, realmente los observadores comunitarios llegan a nuestro respaldo y ellos mismos lo han visto con sus ojos, que no estamos mintiendo y que no estamos exagerando, que es la realidad que están viviendo los campesinos en estos campos. El otro punto es el pago por peligro. Muchas veces nos ha tocado trabajar durante momentos que hay una densa humo o el ambiente está demasiado contaminado y no nos dejan salir del trabajo. Seguimos trabajando. Entonces estamos pidiendo algo, un pago por peligro para poder continuar trabajando, porque a veces no permiten que salgamos porque necesitan las cosechas. Necesitan que el trabajo salga. No importa si estamos cansados, no importa si estamos mal con la garganta o con los ojos irritados o nos sentimos mal. Tenemos que sacar el trabajo. Siempre el trabajo es primero que nuestra salud. Y durante estos tiempos también nos vemos el reto de que las cenizas o todo el aire es fuerte, eso trae tanto las cenizas, tanto tierra, todo lo que pueda encontrar en sus pasos, contamina lo que es el agua. Necesitamos agua limpia, necesitamos beber agua limpia. Nuestro cuerpo necesita agua limpia, así como necesitamos los baños limpios. No podemos usar baños sucios ni tomar agua limpia. Yo creo que ni ellos mismos lo tomarán si se los diéramos a ellos. Y la razón que nosotros los trabajadores trabajamos en los campos o estamos siempre en los campos no es que no tengamos la oportunidad de sobresalir. Tenemos la mayoría de los trabajadores en las tardes, nosotros somos estudiantes. Somos estudiantes, estamos buscando otras oportunidades para poder cambiar nuestras vidas. Pero si algo que nos lleva en los campos es el amor que tenemos hacia la tierra, el amor que tenemos hacia las cosechas. Nosotros nos enseñaron desde niños de amar la tierra, respetar la tierra, cuidar la tierra. Hablamos a veces, nosotros buscamos nuevos trabajos, pero ¿cómo podemos encontrar esos nuevos trabajos? Cuando no hay resiliencia en la tierra. Pedimos resiliencia nosotros, pero no hay resiliencia en la tierra. Entonces, bajo la cosmovisión de nosotros, los grupos indígenas, el agua, la tierra y los seres humanos somos uno solo. Si no cuidamos la tierra o no cuidamos el agua, es como cortarnos un brazo, es como cortarnos una pierna. Entonces, ¿cómo podemos tener un buen trabajo si no hay resiliencia en la tierra? ¿Cómo podemos decir que estamos peleando por algo o exigir algo cuando no entendemos lo que es el amor hacia la tierra? La tierra viene a sanarnos a nosotros, así como nosotros tenemos que sanar la tierra. A nosotros, para nosotros, las comunidades indígenas, la tierra es nuestra madre, el agua es nuestra madre. ¿Cómo podemos imaginar de trabajar con tierras alteradas, así como recoger cosechas alteradas y consumir comida alterada? ¿Por qué nosotros nos hacemos daños a nosotros mismos? ¿Dónde está el amor propio? Si no tenemos un amor propio porque no cuidamos nuestros alimentos, menos vamos a cuidar la tierra y menos vamos a tener un buen trabajo. No podemos cambiar algo si no sanamos a nosotros mismos para poder sanar nuestra tierra. Gracias.
Gracias, Margarita. Thank you, Margarita. Margarita, the other night when we did this action at the Healdsburg Winery, started by saying, I'm 100% a farmer and 100% indigenous. And I think that really impacted everybody, just the knowledge that comes from the land, from her childhood, was really special. My name is Davin Cardenas. I'm the Director of Organizing with North Bay Jobs with Justice. And I've been actually organizing in Sonoma County for over 18 years now. And I have to say that the Five for Farm Workers campaign that we're engaged in is probably one of the most unique campaigns that I've been a part of, in the sense that we're, for us, climate change, climate chaos changes everything. It changes how we relate to one another. It changes how we have to rethink community organizing on the ground. And it reshapes how we think about worker justice and land justice. And I think one of the most impactful components is that we living in a fire zone where this is the norm for us, we have to listen deeply to the land, and we have to listen deeply to the workers. And if we do that, we produce campaigns like the one we're involved in. It's extremely special to be working with Indigenous farmers here in the county. The vineyards of Sonoma County are filled with centuries of Indigenous knowledge that nobody asks the workers about. The way workers pray around water, the way farmers, workers work with fire, the way workers take care of seeds and know when to plant. There's centuries of knowledge up here, and we're simply taking the time to ask about it. And it's pretty beautiful at the same time. And we understand we're a species amongst species. We're here in this ecology, and we're a part of the ecology. So we're simply asking and listening to the land and listening to workers. And I think part of that is why also, we have reached over 900 farm workers. That's why we're having 150 people farm workers coming out to community meetings. That's why over 250 people are picketing at one of the oldest vineyards in the county just last Saturday night. There's the base is being expanded locally. The base of people involved politically is expanding, and I think everybody in the county is having to pay attention to this new shift in worker power that's taking place. So we, as we move into next year too, because we kind of culminated with this large demonstration this past Saturday, we're going to continue pushing these 5 demands for farm workers in the wildfires, but we're also going to be expanding the base more. So now that we've developed and are still expanding that farm worker base, we also see important opportunities to organize disaster workers, disaster cleanup workers, because the sector of workers who clean up after wildfires is also unorganized and highly exploited at this time, and very dangerous. So we want to begin talking with disaster cleanup workers, and we already have connections even amongst people on our current team. We're also going to begin organizing with jardineros, gardeners, because there's a large influx of money coming in from the state and federal government for fire mitigation work. So we see that those is opportunities to organize workers into really good jobs that are going to be there for years and years to come. And we think those could actually be really well-paying jobs done by the same base of workers that we're currently talking and working amongst right now. And then the other piece that we see moving forward is organizing with farm workers as water protectors, because we might be up here in the North Bay somewhat happy with the little rain that's coming, but that's not taking us out of the drought. And water is extremely exploited by the vineyard industry, by the wine industry, and the workers know who turns on and off the faucet every day. So for workers to begin thinking of themselves as water protectors, especially when our rivers are being drained, the aquifers are being drained, and this drought continues, it's going to be extremely important for us to begin thinking again about how we listen to the land, how we listen to workers, and make those shifts in what community organizing looks like up here. So for us, this is extremely important just for building more worker power, shifting policy, and building an organization and a culture that really respects the knowledge and empowers immigrant, indigenous workers, and that those centuries of knowledge that the workers bring. And I think we've demonstrated we can organize a base of workers that can fight for conditions and fight for the land at the same time. And we're asking just for an investment from everyone here to join in that work so that our vision of what this can be coincides with our budget and our ability to actually expand this work on a much larger scale and organize frontline communities. So thank you very much for being on, and I'll pass it back over to Michael, I believe.
Thank you so much, Davin. Thank you, Margarita, and thank you, Max, and all of our really powerful speakers. I will keep my comments brief here because I imagine there's a lot of questions that you all have that we want to dig into. I'm just going to pull out a couple of major takeaways from the presentations that we just heard. And I'll frame it in this way. One is that it's clear that all workers have a stake in this climate issue, right? So listening to Kim and the impacts on their clients and their workers in the Central Valley of California with the transport of fossil fuels and the environmental justice effects that they're already feeling in their communities. The farm workers that are working in the fields and how they are being impacted by the wildfires and other workers in that area. It just makes it clear that all workers need to be involved and at the table when it comes to making these decisions. Another I'll say is a frame is workers as experts, right? So again, we just heard from Margarita and Davin and Max about the farm workers and how they're organizing to make the land resilient, how they know the land, they know what's happening with the land, and they have solutions in terms of how to organize and protect the environment and the climate. So this is one of the things I think that's really important to understand about workers as experts, not only in their field, but being able to come up with solutions and being able to also organize to win those solutions. A couple other quick takeaways is the point about moving from crisis to structural changes. I think this is a point that Max made, is how workers are starting to think about this in their organizing process, is how do we move beyond just the immediate and responding to crisis, but how do we actually develop the longer term structural solutions as well. And lastly is that, so this work cannot be done for workers, it has to be done with workers. And I think it's clear as to why, because of their expertise and solutions. So how do we achieve the vision that we want through organizing and with those that are most affected, both on the job and in the community. So with that, let's move on to questions, and I will pass it back to Rob to lead us in that.
Thank you, Michael, and to all of our speakers. I just really appreciate the rich perspectives you all are sharing with us today. I want to just acknowledge that we've reached the end of our speakers and we'll be transitioning into Q&A. And so we'll be stopping the recording.